Thanks for your company. We're joined now by Senator David Leyonhjelm. Had a quick prediction. Is he going to be for or against the census?
You've already declared that he will not be.
Well,
so...
I don't know. I'm about to ask him for the first time.
Okay, because you didn't
Let's
ask
bring
him
him
in
in.
the break.
Senator, thanks for your company. Congratulations on your re-election.
Thank you.
The census, do you have privacy concerns?
Census is a good thing. We need to count our people.
There's a but
population.
coming, I can tell.
Yeah, there is a but coming, yes. We do. The census is good. It's used for good purposes. Lots of people use it, not just the government, private sector as well. It helps to stop us from making silly mistakes about resource allocations. Well worthwhile to undertake a census. So the question then is, to what extent should we allow a compromise of our privacy for that purpose? Now,
do you need names and addresses, though, for the sort of valuable aggregated data that you're talking about?
It's not as valuable without the names and addresses. The reason being that, first of all, the ABS wants to validate some of the data, so they go out and contact individuals and validate the data. And what they try to do is establish, well, how accurate was it? Was it 98% accurate, 99% accurate, 95% accurate, that sort of thing. There's also some use made of the data with names and addresses where they compare it to other data sources. So longevity tables, for example, death rates, that sort of stuff. So
can anyone at the ABS explain it this succinctly?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so are you saying that someone from the
ABS.
ABS might actually call Peter and say, is your real name really Peter von Vederham?
Yes.
Or whatever you're going to put on the name?
I'm just not going to fill it in.
And at all?
Yeah. So
they can find it.
And then they're probably asking him if he's part of the Jedi Council as well.
This explains my age a bit. 1972, this issue came up, the whole privacy census thing. I was a non-registrant for national service back in those days, which meant you go to jail or get drafted into the army, one or the other, if you didn't register. I wasn't going to register, so I didn't want them to know where I was or who I was or anything like that. So I didn't fill out a census form at all.
How can you not register for the army? You're all into guns and all the rest of it as a libertarian.
Don't be silly. It's about compulsion. Compulsion. Right. I voluntarily joined the Army Reserve many years later. Right. It's all about, my choice, not the government's choice.
But this is compulsory as well.
Yes, it
is. The census, I don't like that.
Yes, that's right, yes. And there are legitimate complaints about it, and it's a balance of utilities, if you like. The census is very useful for, as I said, for allocating resources. On the other hand, there are privacy concerns. Now, I'm critical of the ABS and the government too, representing the ABS, for not having explained why do they need to keep our names and addresses for the extra period. And normally it was 18 months to do what they had to do, now it's 4 years. Now, they've really made a terrible fist of explaining what that's all about.
You make a really good point, Senator, and sorry to interrupt, but basically this comes down to two things that everyone needs to consider when filling out the census. Are you willing to give that information that the government will obviously put to use in how to spend government money, and are you willing to give up that information and weighing that up with the risks of it being misused? Is the misuse the biggest issue here? Because you can opt out for that 4-year retention of data. Oh no, it's the time capsule.
Yeah,
thing.
the time which you didn't opt out on.
No,
Laura has given all of her detail over for
fine.
99 years.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think there is a reasonable question there. So, what's the risk to the data of storing it? The Greens and Nick Xenophon, who I think are the same thing anyway, they worry about it being hacked by external forces. And that's a legitimate concern. Libertarians, namely me and my party and people who think like me, worry about the government misusing the data far more than external sources. Now, so what misuses can it be put to? Well, I can think of some examples. They could identify names and addresses of all the Catholics and go to all the Catholics in Australia and say, are you a pedophile? Or they go to all the Muslims in Australia and say, are you a terrorist? So there are sinister...
They could, but we're not in a presidential race looking at Donald Trump as a contender.
Well, not now, but can you be sure that nothing like that ever happens in this country's future?
Within the next 4 years, yeah, could that happen? not very likely. And the other thing is there's laws against that sort of thing to prevent the government from doing it. And I understand the Bureau of Statistics is encrypting the link between the names and addresses and the data. So even if it got hacked, they would have trouble matching the names with the data. Only the government could misuse the data, and they would need the encryption tool. In the scheme of things, yes, in strictly libertarian terms, it is a concern that especially that they haven't explained it. I am much more worried about metadata, though. Much more worried.
Well, and there wasn't this kind of reaction when we saw I think it was the third tranche of the anti-terror laws pass under the previous Prime Minister, Tony Abbott.
I was complaining about that. I didn't like that metadata at all. Scott Ludlam, he did a big speech on it. You were talking about it?
Yeah, we did talk about it, but it doesn't feel like there's this week-long campaign about it. And I would be more concerned about that as well. It means that telecommunications companies have to hold all the data from phones for 2 years in case ASIO wants to draw on that. Yes. Now, I'd be more concerned about that.
Absolutely right. And as a libertarian, my concern is that the government would have far more reason to misuse that data than it would have to misuse the census data. And also there are issues about whether it's hacked as well. Now, the Greens and Nick Xenophon, in fairness to them, did oppose the metadata legislation as well. But again, their concern was mainly third-party misuse of it rather than government misuse. My primary concern is government misuse. The government justification for having metadata was simply, oh, well, you might be a criminal and we might need to track you down somehow or other via your internet activities.
Yeah, but it can't be used in a situation in court, for example, whereby if someone is trying to sue you, they can't petition or even put a court order in to get that kind of information, or sue the telecommunications company essentially to get that kind of information. So there are provisions there, but
there are some agencies with access to the data, though.
ASIO
for sure, and even ASIC and some of the organisations you wouldn't expect. But so I think on the scale of seriousness, risk to our liberties, they're both there. They're both risks. But relative to the census, the metadata issue is way, way up there.
I want to move to something else. You mentioned before that you... Well, we'll come back to it.
Oh, it's been 47 minutes.
I'll be back. And look, for those of you who are concerned about this, we will be back on this very subject when Newsday resumes at 2 o'clock. But look, I do want to... Something that you did say, by the way, we're standing by for Bill Shorten. We'll go there when he takes to his feet. It doesn't look like he's about to any time soon. But you said something before, Senator, that I thought was really interesting. You know, a quip, but you've said it before on this show as well, about the Greens and Nick Xenophon being sort of almost one and the same. You've talked about their voting record previously. I want to talk about that in the context of government passage of legislation, because if you're right about that, and I went and had a look at the data and you are right about that, his voting pattern with the Greens is pretty unified, then that kills straight away the ability of the government to rely on the crossbenchers to get 9 of 11, because Xenophon's got 3, and that immediately means that you can't get more than 8 if he's not on board, if he's siding with the Greens and the Greens are opposing the government. Yeah,
notionally that's quite right. Yes, a lot of people have been buying into this claim that he makes himself, that he's a centrist. It's a funny centre when it's on the way over towards the Greens end. I don't regard that as centrist. But
you must worry about the government's ability to achieve anything, including the platforms that you and Bob Day might agree with.
Well, frankly, I think this Senate will go for 6 months where the government tries things, gets a vote, looks, sees what happens. Very little will get through, and then they'll stop trying. And unless Labor supports it, it won't come up. Now, in that case, of course, Nick and Pauline and I and all of us will be pretty much irrelevant. It'll be Labor and the government voting, and the government will shrug its shoulders and say, you guys do what you like, we don't care what you think.
Well, you're obviously speaking from experience under the previous Prime Minister. But, look, I think that Bill Shorten is going to take a leaf out of the Tony Abbott opposition playbook here, because why wouldn't he? It was so effective and he's so close at the moment. But I spoke to Darren Hinch on my program last night, and he's been told by the Prime Minister's office that he'll have unmonitored access to Treasury officials if he so requires it, and that there's been a special unit set up in the Prime Minister's office to deal with, to assist the crossbenchers as needed. Do you have any more detail on that? Have you been offered the same thing?
Well, that's nothing new to have access to Treasury. That was offered by right back.
But
from
unmonitored, not, you know, alongside the Treasurer, nothing like that?
Oh, yeah. No. Joe Hockey offered that right from the beginning. It's not new. So it might be
obviously didn't help.
No, didn't help. Well, the Treasury guys...
And it's obviously not going to help with superannuation reforms either.
The Treasury guys are good. I mean, they will, you know, put flesh on the bones, you know, and I've got an interest in economics, so the bones are there. If the bones aren't there, in the case of some of the crossbench senators, they probably put them there too. So that's useful. Having somebody in the Prime Minister's office to deal with the crossbench is also not new. There was a lady in Tony Abbott's office, I think her name was Kate Raggett. She was the go-to person. She wasn't very proactive. She waited for us to call her. I gather this new chap is reaching out, although he hasn't contacted me yet. And yes, the government is certainly trying to get off on the right foot with the new guys. They've even upped the salary of one of our advisors.
How many advisors do you get? How many full-time staff does a senator on the crossbenches get?
It's 7.
7. Now, see, isn't that fascinating though? Because there'll be 4 One Nation crossbenches. That gives them what, 28 staff. That's a pretty big team, if I could put it that way, compared to when Pauline Hanson was there last time in '96 and only had 3 staff.
Didn't Abbott's office also resist against giving Clive Palmer more staff? And I think that was up to 4.
The whole issue of
so
party status, I think, was in the mix there as well.
Yeah, that's right. But look, I don't begrudge the crossbench senators getting as 7 staff. I mean,
I'm not attacking it, but I just think it's interesting.
It's difficult to get your head around as it is, and
I agree with
so
that.
much legislation being in the hands of the crossbench. I think it's absolutely necessary.
Couldn't agree more with you about that, particularly where you're individual crossbenchers and all you've got are those 7 staffers. But it's just interesting, I think, to see that One Nation now is not, you know, it's not a party that's just sort of an isolated individual here or there. It's 4 senators, crucial to government getting legislation through or not, and a team of 28 paid-up advisors to go with those 4 senators. That's quite a block.
Yeah, it's a lot. To be frank, your parliamentary duties, you don't need that many. My preference would be to save some of the taxpayers' money and not have quite so many. In fact, I didn't appoint my 7th person until, well, during the campaign, basically, to help with some logistics issues with the campaign. So, and I think I could get by quite happily with 5 or 6. It's a matter of the quality. Now, one thing I would acknowledge is the Prime Minister has recently, well, just yesterday I got the letter confirming that we can pay our most senior person, if you like, our preferred advisor, more money. And that's good.
At a senior advisor level, is it, or at advisor level?
Yes, advisor level, and the others are assistant advisor. Well, the other 2 are assistant advisor.
And then elected officers.
The 4 are elected officers, that's right. But they're not hugely well paid by the standards of often where they come from.
Sure.
And one of my guys, for example, took quite a substantial cut in salary to come and work for me. So it's now good that I can boost his salary up a little bit. But I don't think we all need 7 staff to get our heads around our parliamentary activities.
Maybe you don't, but perhaps there are some others.
Do you want to name some names, Laura? Yeah, Jackie Lambie, no question. Pauline Hanson personally, no doubt.
She doesn't use them for her parliamentary activities.
Malcolm Roberts is going to need a lot of help with those semicolons.
He's incredibly well qualified, though, isn't he? He got an MBA from Chicago Uni, I heard him say in that rambling press conference.
Did he?
I wouldn't have thought that's an easy thing to get.
I have no idea. No.
Yeah.
Wasn't easy to get.
Bill Shorten's talking. We're going to have to leave it there, Senator.
Senator, thank you for...
Appreciate you joining us on the program. Laura Jays, thanks for stepping in, even though you're a little bit late up on set.
No, thank you.
Thanks for your company. Christina will be back tomorrow. We're going to have to go now to Bill Shorten. He is speaking. Let's have a quick listen in.